Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we begin discussing today's Hindu newspaper, just a reminder, I hope all of you are writing answers day in and day out and practicing your answer writing skills. If not, this is to remind you that you can answer the questions given at the end of this video by clicking on the link of the BYJU'S portal, which is given in the description of the video. You submit your answers on this portal and you will be able to see the answers submitted by other students as well. You can cross evaluate and learn from others' mistakes, and you can get this feedback which will help you improve in further answer writing. Don't forget to take advantage of this platform, which is free of cost for every UPSC aspirant down there. Now let's begin today's analysis with the first article, which is written because 28th of May is celebrated as the Menstrual Hygiene Day in India, with the purpose of increasing awareness about the issue of feminine hygiene, which has been ignored for a very long time in India. Now, this is no hidden secret that we are very uncomfortable when it comes to talking about menstrual health and hygiene management of women in India. As a result of which, a lot of women face this taboo. A lot of women have been forced to come out of schools and colleges. A lot of women have been forced to come out of the workforce also just because they have not been able to manage the menstrual health in a manner that they actually require. As per the author, the situation is even far worse when you talk about women and girls with disabilities. Because just being a woman or a girl in India is itself a disadvantage. Then you add to it the fact that some of these are disabled and some of them come from very poor backgrounds, that just adds to the problem that they are facing in their day-to-day life. Although in the past few years we have seen an increased awareness about the topic, we have seen that this has become a part of the mainstream debate. The availability of menstrual products such as sanitary pads have increased. Their costs have also reduced drastically, thus making them much more available throughout the country. We see how movies such as Pad Man have become a hit in the mainstream media. We have come a long way from where we were in the 1990s. Just to give you an example, in the 1990s, there were multiple states in India where there was a campaign that there should not be any ads of sanitary pads displayed on the television. In Maharashtra specifically, there was a large campaign that on Doordarshan these kind of ads should not run. From that era where we were so uncomfortable about talking about these natural things to today when it is at least a part of the mainstream discussion, we have come a long way. However, the authors here are making a point that now the focus has to be put on disabled population of girls and women in India. As per the last census that we have, that is 2011, nearly 2.7 crore people in India are disabled. Although we do have the Rights of Persons with Disability Act in India that provides them a lot of rights, but we have to understand that the on-ground situation is very different, especially amongst the girls. The girls who come from the marginalized community have a lot of burden on themselves. They have to face the discrimination being the women. They have to also face the problems coming from the poor families, and if they are disabled, then there are other problems that they actually face while trying to make a career for themselves. Added to this, the deep prejudice that we have, the misconceptions that we have about this particular topic makes the situation even worse. Even today, women would be very uncomfortable talking about these issues with other people in the society, not because they have a problem, just because the other person might not be open to this idea of discussing something which is a very natural process. Now, the good part that has happened is that the United Nations Population Fund and Water Aid India have come together to understand these issues and try to identify the solutions. They have identified that the problems in this area include lack of accessible information, education and communication, especially for those who are either deaf or mute. Because for them you require some other forms of information so that the info can be passed out to them. The other problem that we have is that there is a lack of safe menstrual products and hygiene promotion in India. As per the National Family Health Survey, less than two-thirds of girls and women with disabilities between the age of 15 and 24 years actually use hygienic menstrual protection methods. Maybe because they are not aware of better things, or maybe they just can't afford it. But whatever the reason may be, the responsibility is on the society to ensure that this does not go on. We also have to focus on responsive and inclusive water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities. This is together called WASH, WASH, which stands for water, sanitation, and hygiene. This also includes ensuring disposal solutions in different settings, including schools, colleges, etc. We have discussed this particular issue multiple times in the past as well. A lot of schools, offices, even public spaces, including the lower judiciary, don't even have separate women washrooms. Just imagine how difficult it would be for the women to spend day in and day out in these settings where they have to go every single day, knowing fully well that they can't even use a washroom at these places. Now, we should not assume that this problem is only in India. This is a problem that is seen in a lot of developing nations where topics such as menstruation are treated as taboo. There are various reasons behind it. Maybe the people are just not comfortable enough to talk about it. Maybe the government is not sensitive enough to this issue. The other reason can be that there is so lack of women representation in the government or in the parliament that no good policies have been made on this matter. All of that combined means that we don't have enough initiatives being taken in this regard. For example, crores and crores of women have to forcefully drop out of school every single year in India because they know that when they start to enter their menstruation age, they would not have the kind of support and the facilities that they would require in the school setup, which is something that has to change. Now, what exactly has the government done in this regard? Over the past decade or so, there have been multiple steps taken by the government to ensure that we make the things better. Let me give you a few examples. There is a menstrual hygiene scheme launched by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, which focuses on promoting menstrual hygiene amongst adolescent girls in rural areas specifically. From 2014 onwards, this scheme was extended to all the districts under the Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram. We also have the Sabla program by the Ministry of Women and Child Development that focuses on nutrition, health, hygiene, reproductive, and sexual health. We also have the Swachh Bharat mission, under which menstrual hygiene management is made an integral part. In fact, menstrual hygiene management guidelines have been issued by the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation in this regard as well. As I mentioned in the beginning of this article, 28th of May, that is today, is observed as a menstrual hygiene day in order to raise awareness about this issue. It was initiated by a Germany-based NGO called WASH United, WASH, WASH United. As I said earlier, WASH in this regard stands for water, sanitation and hygiene. The next article that we have today focuses on the teachings of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, often called the father of India's constitution. Now today is not his birth anniversary, but the reason why this article has been written is that the authors are making a point that although it has become very fashionable for political parties in different parts of India to observe and celebrate Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's birth anniversary, but we are missing the point. That is, none of the political parties or the governments in India right now are true to the ideals that were followed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Most of these exercises of celebrating his birthday or hanging his photos in your offices, as per the authors, are done for the political gain. Because political leaders also know that there is a big section of population in India that will vote for you if you idolize Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And this is a time to change that. Now, the interesting part is that the birthday of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is not just celebrated in India, but his personality is celebrated across the world. In fact, to honor Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and other anti-caste icons such as Jyotiba Phule, Canada's British Columbia province declared April as a Dalit History Month. Not just this, in the federal state of Colorado and Michigan in the US, it is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Equality Day that is celebrated on the 14th of April, that is his birthday. The government of India has also asked the public institutions to formally celebrate his birthday. Then there are state governments such as UP government, Tamil Nadu government also that have been observing this day in their own capacity. Now all this is good and it should happen because he was such an amazing personality and his contribution to India is unparalleled. But the problem is that in doing all this, we are not focusing on the real ideals that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar used to follow. And a part of the problem is with us as well. When we discuss about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the first thing that comes to our mind is that he was a father of our constitution. He was the head of the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly. However, his real impact and his contribution towards what India is today is far, far more than that, which we tend to ignore. Yes, he was the biggest Dalit leader of his time, but his views about anti patriarchal vision, his views about economic equality, his views about justice, women's rights have all been ignored sadly. The authors here say that he was a member of the Viceroy's Council and he wrote extensively in the pre independence era. One of his writings, titled The States and Minorities, said that we have to ensure a robust political economy. In fact, in 1928 itself, he had actually introduced a maternity benefit bill and got it passed in the Bombay Legislative Council. And then in 1942, he was the one who changed the working hours to 8 hours per day from earlier 12 hours. He was such a visionary that he could see these problems of the labor class so early on. In fact, the governments across India are now trying to go back on this word. For example, the UP government in 2020 introduced the 12-hour workday back. It was only after the labor unions protested and the Allahabad High Court issued a notice to the state government that the UP government rolled back this particular order. Similar things have been happening in other states such as Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, for example, when the four labor codes were introduced, the workers protested and asked the state government to pass a resolution against the four labor codes because they were seen to be anti-labor. The problem also in India is that we have a lot of contract laborers. Now, contract workers or contract laborers are the ones who are not full-time employees of any organization. So, for example, if you are a contract worker at some organization, that means that you will not get benefits such as leaves, such as health insurance, such as weekly offs, etc. As a contract based employee, you will only be paid for the day that you are actually reporting on the duty. Any particular day that you are not going there, you will not be paid for that. That is how the contractual work actually takes place. In India, the number of contract workers are increasing year after year as per the authors here, even in those sectors which earlier used to have full-time permanent laborers. The companies also prefer having contract workers because it relieves them of the responsibility of taking care of them. The companies can fire the contract workers whenever they want. They don't have the responsibility to take care of them in the hard times, and that is why companies also prefer employment in the form of contract laborers. But the problem is, in most of the cases, the contract workers are given a far lower salary for the same work that they do as compared to the permanent laborers. For example, Punjab and Haryana High Court had said that in the Punjab government, those who are temporary employees do not have the claim to receive equal salary even if they do the same amount of work as the government workers. Thankfully, the Supreme Court in 2016 overturned that. The Supreme Court said that the contract laborers also, if they are working in the same manner, doing the same thing as the permanent workers in the government offices, they deserve the same salary. Although the Supreme Court gave this verdict in 2016, the ground reality is still very, very different. And that is why you see across the country, every few months, there are protests taken out by these contract workers in different government agencies. A few days back, in fact, if you remember, we had talked about how Anganwadi workers also are employed as volunteers only across the country. And because they are volunteers, they don't have to be paid a fixed salary by the government, and they have also been protesting and asking for a permanent job with the government. The periodic labor force survey data says that amongst the regular workers also, they don't really get a lot of salary. 45% of workers in India were paid less than 10,000 a month, and 72% were paid below 18,000 a month. That points out towards the economic inequality that lies in India right now, which Dr. Ambedkar was really opposed to. Dr. Ambedkar, in fact, had made it clear that if we have economic inequality in India, that will eventually lead to the death of Indian democracy, because one class of citizens will then be able to pressurize the other class of citizens who are not earning as much. In fact, he was the one who established the concept of equal pay for equal work long before it became a part of discussion even in the developed world. It was him who insisted this on being included in the directive principles of the state policy. See how much ahead of his time was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And the same topic is still being discussed because it has still not been implemented completely across the country. Right now, 93% of the workforce in India comprises of informal workers, and the four labor codes that have been introduced as per the author are against them. Now, do understand this article and all the points that we are discussing here are the points of view of the author that have written this article. You are well within your rights to not agree with this. For example, if the authors are saying that the four labor codes are against the interest of the laborers, if you think otherwise, you can stick to that. But the example that the authors are giving is in the Industrial Relations Code 2020, the workers have not been given the right to strike. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, on the other hand, had clearly said that right to strike is one of the fundamental rights of the workers and it cannot be taken away from them. Similarly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the view that key sectors of the economy like basic industries, agriculture, insurance should be in the hands of the government only. They should be nationalized. And what the government is doing right now is going opposite to it. We see the LIC IPO was introduced, although it is still a government company, but it has been privatized to a certain extent. We see a lot of other government companies being sold to the private sector, including Air India. As per Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, agricultural land should only be held by the government and the government should rent it out to people on the basis of the requirement for collective farming. But what we are seeing today is a divergence from what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had imagined India to be. Thus, just celebrating his birthday and remembering him does not really make any sense if we are not leading the path that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had showed us long way back. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the issues with great people is that they are great in so many fields that we tend to ignore a lot of them. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, for example, when we talk about him as the leader of the Dalits, we talk about him as a father of the constitution, but we ignore the fact that he excelled in many other fields as well. Let me give you a few examples. His views on economy were followed by many esteemed people at that time. The Reserve Bank of India came into being as a result of the Hilton Young Commission's recommendation. And this commission actually considered the guidelines given by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in the problem of the rupee. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar also knew that there will be a time when we will have a water distribution problem in India. He was the one who helped in establishing the Central Water Commission and integrated water resources management. It was his ideas that later on led to the establishment of Damodar River Valley Project, the Mahanadi Project, etc. He was also a well-recognized labor leader. He participated in all the three roundtable conferences and became the voice of the depressed classes. He was a member of the Bombay Assembly and opposed our introduction of the Industrial Disputes Bill of 1937, since it did not include the laborers' right to strike. He also fought for the fair condition of work for the workers in India. He also had a great vision of India's agriculture problem. His essay titled The Small Holdings in India and Their Remedies proposed industrialization as the answer to India's agriculture problems. In fact, he was the first lawmaker in India to introduce a bill for abolishing the serfdom of agricultural tenants. He was also a great supporter of women's rights. He contributed to reduction of the working hours to 48 hours a week and lifted the ban on employment of women for underground work in coal mines and also introduced a provision of overtime, paid leave, minimum wage, etc. So the next time that we remember Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, let's think of him as much more than the father of the Indian Constitution and the leader of the depressed classes. The next important news that we have is that the Google company is right now in talks with the Indian government to integrate its shopping services with something called the ONDC, that is Open Network for Digital Commerce. Now, in very simple terms, a few months back, the government of India announced that they are working on ONDC, that is an open source platform under which traders in India can sell their products online. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to break the monopoly of Flipkart, which is owned by Walmart, and Amazon, and make sure that even the vendors who are not being able to get a listing on these platforms are able to sell their products online. The government of India estimates that Indian e-commerce market was worth more than $55 billion, and monopoly in this particular sector would be detrimental to the country's long-term interest. And that is why the government of India wanted to create an even playing field in the form of ONDC. Although it has not been launched so far, But the good news is that Google also wants to be a part of this project. Now, this is what the government released as a creative a few months back when we talked about the ONDC. That is, it would have transparent rules because now, for example, when you go to Amazon and let's say you have to buy curtains or you have to buy a bed sheet or any, let's say, kitchen appliance, you search for that. Let's say you search for pressure cooker. Now, usually the first result is the one that you will buy because let's say if you want to buy prestige pressure cooker, there are hundreds of people who would be selling the same pressure cooker on Amazon. Which is the one that comes first on the ranking, which is the one that comes second or third on the ranking? There is no clarity on that because it is the algorithms used by these companies like Amazon, Flipkart that decides that. So there is no transparency which the government wants to change. Also, these platforms take a huge commission from the money that is being earned by these sellers. So the government wants to lower that also to make it much more easier for the new sellers to actually be a part of e-commerce. It also will lower the time to market scale and ensure that there's no monopoly being developed in this market. Now, the ONDC, as I said earlier, is not new. This was something that the government had announced in the middle of last year. This project aims to curb the digital monopolies and ensure that the e-market processes become open source so that anyone can come and list their products and become an equal player as compared to the other sellers as well. The Ministry of Commerce Affairs had released a draft e-commerce rule for customer protection also, which seeks to bring changes in how the e-commerce marketplaces such as Amazon and Flipkart actually work. The main aim is to promote an open network and open source methodology so that it is not partial to anyone. The project will be implemented and will be looked after by the Quality Council of India. On this platform, the buyers and sellers may transact irrespectively of the fact that they're attached to one specific e-commerce portal. Meaning that what happens today is if a seller is selling his or her product at Amazon, they are usually not allowed to sell the same product on Flipkart. That is the kind of agreement that these e-commerce companies have. That is why you might not find the same product being listed on these two websites. That is how they create an advantage for themselves and they try to pressurize the seller to sell only on their platform, which the government wants to change under the ONDC, and the Google company now wants to collaborate with the government in this particular area. These are the important articles on the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number 1. The battles fought by Ambedkar are still far from over. Comment. Second. Improved awareness about menstrual hygiene would win half the battle for women's right to live with dignity. In this context, elaborate the efforts made by the Government of India in this regard. Both the questions have to be answered within 250 words each. As I said in the beginning of the video, you go to a description of this video. There is a link that will take you to the portal. Click on that and leave your answers to these questions there. You can see the answers written by other students as well. You can check those, leave your feedback and get your answer evaluated by the fellow aspirants as well. Thank you so much for watching the video.